All right, good afternoon, Dr. Pinwell. This evening we will be covering Eliquis. The generic name of this drug is Empivaxiban. And today I will be your FDA investigator in looking into this drug. All right, so the manufacturer of Eliquis is Bristol Myers Squibb Co. This medication treats atrial fibrillation in patients that have just recently had a large surgery, such as a knee or hip replacement, but can also be used for patients that have also had other large surgeries. This drug is mainly used as an anticoagulant, meaning that we're trying to prevent clots from either entering the brain, heart, or other parts of the body. So now we'll cover the mechanism of action for Eliquis. Before we get into the weeds of it, there's two different clotting cascades that happen in the human body, extrinsic and intrinsic. Extrinsic activates when you have trauma on the external side of the body, and intrinsic is when you activates when you have trauma inside the vascular system, in the body obviously. Both pathways contain the factor XA inhibitor, which Eliquis works on. So Eliquis is a selective direct XA factor inhibitor, which prohibits prothrombin to propagate, meaning that without Eliquis inhibiting XA factor XA is the catalyst for the final step of coagulation, which means that the prothrombin will lead into forming fibrin, which then will lead into forming a clot. All right, so as you can see, this is the mechanism of action written out, showing the clotting cascade. It looks complicated, but I'll break it down for you. So first you have clotting factor 12, moves into clotting factor 12A, this moves down into clotting factor 11, and then 11A, so it moves down into 9 and 9A, then finally down to 10 and factor XA, which is the one that we're inhibiting with Eliquis. So as you can see, Eliquis comes down here, selectively binds to factor XA, which then cancels the rest of this process. As you can see, if Eliquis did not selectively bind here, the final clotting cascade happens, which forms fibrin, and then finally into clots.
Alrighty, so here I just wanted to further again show the actual clotting factor cascade here. As you can see, Eliquis on the right hand side here coming in to inhibit the XA clotting factor, therefore ending the clotting cascade from moving on into forming fibrin, and then eventually into clots.
All right, so now we're going to go over some of the side effects that patients have experienced with Eliquis. This information is derived mainly from the Aristotle clinical trials that Bristol Myers Squibb was running, and then also a couple of external clinical trials when the drug was actually out being used in the real world as well. Some patients reported minor bleeding, meaning nosebleeds and things of that nature. This one right here is kind of a big one, spinal or epidural blood clots. That can be devastating. I was reading some data from the Aristotle clinical trial as well. Sometimes that led even to death. Bruising was another one. So some more of that intrinsic clotting cascade stuff happening. And then we also had patients reporting nausea and also anemia. And just a reminder, anemia is low red blood cell count. So those are some of the side effects for Eliquis. All right, now for some non-FDA related research. As an investigator, I believe very much in my own research, but of course, getting outside sources or a second opinion is always important. So for number one, we actually had some controversies of this drug being out in the real world. But when we were looking into the clinical trials that were ran by Bristol Myers Squibb, we did notice some irregularities. For example, in the Aristotle study, there were concerns being raised about data irregularities and a cover-up. There were a couple of disappearing patient records that we found, and immediately after some of these patient records were deleted, this led to the dismissal of a couple of key employees that were used in drug discovery. These issues led us to question whether Eliquis should be promoted as a superior anticoagulant, particularly regarding its low mortality rates. Additionally, we also found a couple of research done through an outside study called the Athens study. This study found that switching from Eliquis to rivaroxaban, which is another anticoagulant drug, this actually leads to patients experiencing higher risk of stroke or systematic embolism, and also puts patients at higher risk. So we recommend that if patients do start Eliquis, stay on Eliquis, don't switch to another alternative.